reimagining and renegotiating the Taiwanese sense of self, the Taipei Experience in a post-Taiwan New Cinema. Taiwan, taking a trajectory familiar to many post-colonial nations, strives to distinguish its independent identity from China by rapidly globalizing its capital, Taipei. As the globalization of Taipei accelerates, the discussion of a Taiwanese identity is confronted by the massive transformation of the Taipei cityscape, in which Taipei has been transforming into a series of heterotopias that rapidly replace the absolute spaces. In this sense, the earlier studies on the hybrid nature of the Taiwanese sense of self in relation to the Taiwanese New Cinema's refiguration of the Taiwanese experience, which refigures Taipei as a site of cultural hybridization with distinct Taiwanese experiences, becomes difficult to realize. Consequently, the independent subjectivity emerged from the Taiwanese experience, which the Taiwanese New Cinema in the 1980s aims to differentiate from the Chinese culture, becomes difficult to find in the Taipei urban cinema around the turn of the century. This shift in the cinematic configuration of the city through the Taipei urban cinema's portrayal of the spectral urban space appears to conform with the political, economical, and cultural movement proceeding in Taiwan in the age of transnational capitalism. In this regard, Taipei-based urban films, Edward Young's Terrorizer, Hou Xiaoxian's Good Men, Good Women, Cai Mingliang's Vive L'Amour, and Wan Ren's Connection by Fate came into view around the turn of the century and manifest the spectrality of Taiwanese history through their rendering of Taipei as a series of post-modern liminal spaces, where reimaginations and renegotiations constantly take place. From the perspective of a generation of Taiwanese people like myself, who has no direct contact or memory of the Taiwanese experience, namely the arrival of the Nationalist Kuomintang and the subsequent atrocities committed on the island, I therefore argue that the emergence of this cinematic theme unfolding through the post-Taiwan New Cinema's Taipei-based urban films collectively becomes a critique of the history of Taiwan by distancing Taipei from the Taiwanese experience. This cinematic theme implies the possibilities of the emergence of the Taipei experience as a replacement for the Taiwanese experience and therefore illuminates expressly an alternative route to the envisioning of the Taiwanese national identity around the turn of the century. For this purpose, Walter Benjamin's Now Time and Jack Derrida's Disjointed Time with Spectres, both called to historical accountability mindful of the dead, are helpful for our analysis here on the post-Taiwan New Cinema's manifestation of the spectral temporalities as historical allegory. Along with Benjamin's description, quote, "For every image of the past that is not recognized by the present as one of its own concerns threatens to disappear irretrievably," unquote. Derrida's disjointed time with the specters, which leads to a radicalized conception of historical justice, also undermines modernity's homogeneous time, fomenting instead a radicalized accountability to those who are no longer with us, yet still there. In this sense, haunting as a recognition of commonalities between those who are and those who are no longer becomes a solidarity with specters made possible by remembering. And quoting Benjamin again, blasts a specific era out of the homogeneous course of history, end of quote. Derrida's concept of ontology illustrates the spectral aspect of history, a past that is already not there but at the same time makes itself present by way of the ambiguous appearance of the specter. Derrida's spectrality's linking of modelized presence carries forward Benjamin's now times demanding of a radical orientation to the past and therefore inspires the discussion of the future of a Taiwanese identity in a post-colonial context. Together with Homi Bhabha's provocative strategy for reading between the pedagogical and performative that provides the sites for the discussion of a cultural hybridity in the Taiwanese New Cinema, Derrida's reflection on ontology and Benjamin's perception of now time, illuminating the discourse of history and memory through their critical reviews emphasizing the temporal dimension, express an awareness that contemporary historical developments requires a different and a more adequate theoretical response, one that also addresses directly the problematic of global capitalism. Such awareness can be revealed through the following analysis of the thematic shift from the Taiwanese New Cinema to the post-Taiwan New Cinema. The Taiwanese New Cinema's cinematic rewrites of Taiwan's modern history as a response to the Taiwanese people's desperate searching for their cultural identity after the lifting of Kuomintang's martial law depend extensively on the revitalization of Taiwanese popular memory of the historical era long considered taboo. The succeeding post-Taiwan New Cinema's filmic approach, in addition to their inheritance of the Taiwanese New Cinema's social and cultural practices, features the 1990s as the age of confusion, in which people living or surviving in Taipei become alienated souls, struggling to catch something out of their meaningless lives and to find a place they can call home. Through gradually altering and replacing the Taiwanese experience depicted through the recovery of popular memory and traumatic history, the post-Taiwan New Cinema films begin to engage with the problematic of global capitalism through their cinematic representation of the Taipei Experience that derives from their diverse treatments and delineation of the Taipei cityscape and its urbanites around the turn of the century. Recalling both Derrida and Benjamin's theories on time and history, the diverse cinematic style emerging in the post-Taiwan New Cinema not only bring forward the Taiwanese New Cinema's tradition of realism, but also express a critique to the rapidly growing Taipei with its awareness of the loss of connection to the Taiwanese experience, namely the historical consciousness of Taiwanese history and land. In short, the Taiwanese New Cinema's cinematic approach, which endeavors to reveal a more integrated and more distinct Taiwanese historical subjectivity and cultural hybridity, never cease to inspire its follower, just as how Sun Songlong describes the specters of the Taiwanese New Cinema hauntingly linger on Taiwanese cinema. End of quote.